Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to come to our leadership forum today. I am honored to introduce two great Aggies and what they're going to talk about. So Greg and Eric Levesque both graduated with degrees in economics from the Huntsman School, and they were both Huntsman scholars. Eric also holds an MBA from BYU and is fluent in Russian. And Greg received a master's degree in international relations and national security studies from Georgetown University and is fluent in Chinese. They both pursued careers in international relations, with Eric working in the Middle East and Greg working with several companies and government agencies focused on China. Eric and Greg are co-founders of Strider Technologies, where Eric serves as COO and Greg serves as CEO. Strider Technologies helps companies, universities, research institutions, and government agencies protect their innovation and intellectual property from theft. So we're excited to learn more about that today, and please help me welcome Greg and Eric Levesque to the Huntsman School.
Can you hear me okay? All right. I'm Greg Levesque. I'm the CEO. I'm 3 minutes older, so that's how I was able to get this top juicy spot. But we're excited to be here today. And as part of the leadership forum, rather than talking about like leadership or other aspects of that as we've learned through our careers, but we wanted to bring to life actually Strider, what we're doing, tell you a little bit about the journey we've been on, but also more importantly, like what you all are doing here at Utah State University and how that can parlay into tackling some very wicked problems. And we'll cover some of those here today. So I'm happy to be here. I'll kick it over to Eric if he has any opening remarks, and then we'll just dive right in.
Well, let's do it. Yeah, the world's changing rapidly, and I think it's exciting to be here at Utah State, where we can dive into the nuances of these issues. You guys are studying them day in and day out, and at the end of the day, what we're trying to focus on here and help bring awareness to is that the geopolitical landscape has effectively shifted, and what we see is industry is the front lines of the new battle space.
Yeah. So another way to frame this, right? So I spent my career living and working in DC. A lot of the genesis from Strider came from what I would call that training ground of being able to see a little bit of what was going on in the US government, how they were perceiving, responding to, and then tackling some of these emerging threats. Immediately what comes to mind is China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, state actors that are getting very aggressive in the geopolitical domain. And what's happening is they're pursuing what are called like gray zone activities. So when you think about this battle that's happening, a lot of it is centered around emerging frontier technologies. And the reason for that is because there's no clear winner today. So quantum, synthetic biology, AI, space technology, it's open which country, which company is going to become the dominant player. And if you go throughout world history, technological revolutions generally follow massive geopolitical shifts. And it enables new countries to basically rise up in the hierarchy. And what we're seeing with China in particular is that they have actually organized their entire government and intelligence apparatus around targeting companies. And in the US, we have a very clearly delineated legal system that says, okay, the US intelligence community, the Department of Defense, their job is to support and protect the government secrets, government personnel. In some instances, there will be support over to industry or to companies, but it's actually, in many respects, legally restricted. So what you have is basically a nation state moving nation state-like resources to mobilize and target industry, acquire IP, acquire know-how, recruit personnel, and they're sitting ducks. Companies are sitting ducks, basically. So this is a good representation of the scope and scale of the problem, just framed within other economic metrics, the US defense budget, to highlight the scope and scale of the threat that's happening today.
On like a personal note, the concept here when we started Strider, like Greg and I were having conversations about a lot of incidents that were being reported on. He was in DC, I was in the Middle East at the time. And in the Middle East, we were seeing, this was 2017 to 2019. If you recall, the United States was actively communicating that it was starting to withdraw from the region a bit, and inevitably it created a vacuum. So it always has to get filled. And what we were seeing is it was getting filled by those actors Greg was mentioning. And when you look at it on the ground and you see it actually occurring day in and day out, you realize like there really is an information asymmetry. There's a disadvantage that most folks in the commercial sector have because you view things through a commercial lens as a normal M&A transaction or the client relationship. But in this case, the counterparty had a very different objective. They had a grand strategy they were executing on. So we needed to fill that gap. We needed to create a better apparatus for understanding, and we thought that was through data. And so when you look at this too, the thing that Greg mentioned of scope and scale, in the news, I mean, just a couple weeks ago, you probably saw there was an engineer at Google that was arrested for stealing IP. You can kind of look at those and think they're individual cases and they're one-offs. But when you look at this number, you realize the only way you achieve this level of IP theft is if it's a global system. So that's what we wanted to set out to understand and map out and dissect.
One other thing too I'll share with you. So I was part of the US Trade Reps 301 investigation team. This was in 2016-17 that basically began to put together a legal basis of like illicit Chinese trade practices in the United States. And so that's where that $600 billion number comes from, is the USTR 301 investigation report that was made public. But I'll tell you, in the closed door room, after that report, or after the economists who basically pegged the cost of IP theft, presented this to the team, somebody, I forget who it was, somebody said, well, how do they do it? Crickets. So, I mean, that was like a light bulb moment for me. I mean, sitting in that room, going through like months of work to put all this together, and then be able to see like, okay, the cost is enormous. But then realizing that like nobody quite knew how, right? You would just kind of see the incident occur and then react to it. And that was really where that I think Eric and I got on the phone and said, okay, look, we're doing this in open source, the data's there. Every investigation that we're involved in is going back to industry. He's meeting with foreign government investment funds coming to the Middle East. Like we can start to see that industry is the battle space. And then that is what triggered this decision to start Strider. Part of it too is around, back to leadership. The U.S. is the global leader in the world today. One of the things that has become a profound realization for me since starting the company is how much we are needed everywhere in the world. And I'll give you guys some examples of that. So we've had the fortune of meeting with a number of foreign government agencies, very high-level folks, ministers of defense, heads of intelligence services. It doesn't matter whether we're in Asia or Europe. Everybody asks about America. What are we doing? How do we see the problem? What are we mobilizing to confront? That, oftentimes I think most folks here just think everyone is happy-go-lucky in a way, or they're going to tackle the problems themselves. But American leadership is wanted. Believe it or not. Okay, believe it or not, it's wanted. We get asked about it. We're not even in the U.S. government, of course, but like this is what's happening. And part of the problem is countries other than the United States do not have the economic capacity, the financial capacity, or the military capacity to confront this challenge. Full stop. So they are looking for allies, and they're looking to build capability together that can then help them elevate their game, elevate their response to this. And that's, I think, why we are also seeing a big wave coming out of the U.S. that is a pretty profound shift in technology leadership. And the CHIPS Act might be a good one to hit on, and the European CHIPS Act as well, as to why we are now seeing countries that have traditionally been against industrial policy moving into it and trying to actually drive those industries into a place where it becomes a capability that can be leveraged for the country.
The other part of this that we're seeing is there's a lot of emerging technology today that's dual use. because it's dual use, meaning it can be used for government use cases and needs and also the private sector, government has more of a role to play in it, generally speaking. And there's a level of desire to protect what's being created. Most of it's being created in the private sector when you think about quantum and AI in particular. These are paradigm shifting technologies that I don't think we really fully can imagine what the implications are once those technologies reach a scale of adoption and a sophistication that they'll be able to be deployed across industry and across government. On the quantum side, the biggest concern is around being able to just rapidly go after encrypted data sets and systems that historically are very well protected and critical to our systems here, from infrastructure to how government works and communication and all of that. But what we're really excited about and what we're seeing in all of those is that data plays a role. Data is a fuel for all of these emerging technologies, and we see it as a factor of production. So as was mentioned in the intro, Greg and I studied economics. Who else here is a econ major? We've got a couple of them? Okay. So you guys know the term like factor of production. This goes way back. You can even, in the Adam Smith times, you've got land, labor, and capital. In the Industrial Revolution, like these were the main sources of economic growth and how you thought about your labor, how you thought about land and capital. That's what drove business and your economy. In the information age, this is fundamentally shifting, and data has a massive role to play in that. So that's what Strider's focused on. We're focused on harnessing data like a factor of production to fuel key capabilities for industry and government around protecting IP, as Greg was talking about, but also it's not just defense. It's also being able to then compete, use data to better allocate resources, to better understand the risk landscape and where there's opportunities as well. So data, if you look at this chart here, we started the company in 2019. It was a pretty good timing. You can't always get that right. I will say, but in entrepreneurship, if you get the timing right, it usually helps with a lot of other aspects of the business. But we saw with COVID actually, and everybody being forced remote, more data flow online from personal devices and activity, business, and government. So everybody had a massive shift to more data online. That creates a very unique opportunity to position yourself to collect that data, the data that's valuable. The goal that we have is to be very focused on what we're targeting and collecting, not a Hoover approach. There's always tons of data that you can consume. But what you find out is that just because you have a lot of data doesn't mean you have a lot of insight. And so we do live in a data-rich world. But as I think we all know, and it's a little tongue-in-cheek, intelligence is in short supply. We see this across the board as things are rapidly shifting. It's about understanding and speed to understanding so you can have speed to action. And that's really like what we want to enable.
Another way of thinking about it is, how do you make decisions? Decisions are made usually based off of some set of factors, inputs, the strategy of your business, your objectives that you have, and then you use data to basically underpin those decisions. I think what we're on the cusp of seeing is the rapid automation of the collection, processing, and then the decision point. So another way to frame this, we don't have a demo to show you, but we've been doing quite a bit of work around generative AI. So what is the core fuel of large language models? It's data, what the training data that goes into it. Strider is sitting on a massive data set, 10 billion objects right now, predominantly in Chinese, Russian, Farsi. It's very unique. Few organizations in the entire world have it. So then when you combine that with a generative AI model, we're using ChatGPT 4.0, you can quite literally just fully automate and ask any question you want, and then pre-program the output to create an Intel product. So basically, it's automating the entry-level Intel analysts. So we could ask it questions like, if you think about in the intelligence community world, like targeting. give me the name of 3 people that came out of this university, worked at these companies, and has these expertise. And then it will populate that, put it into a beautiful intelligence report, linked to the sources of where that was all drawn from. So we've removed the hallucination piece of that for the use case that we're developing. But in essence, I mean, that's the beauty and the opportunity that I think sits in front of entrepreneurs, because the toolkit you have is now expanding rapidly and becoming much more sophisticated, beyond just land, labor, and capital. Right? Those are like basic inputs. Now this is reaching it to a totally different level, and it is in the digital domain, but has profound implications for real world. So this is a new category that we're creating. Back to like leadership. In hindsight, if Eric and I were really just looking to get rich, I don't think we would have started this business.
Most people think Strider's the kids' bicycles.
Yeah.
So we could have gone that route.
Yeah. But I think we're doing what we call category creation. So there was no company like Strider before. There was no category called strategic intelligence. This was basically an idea and a concept that we have been working on developing, year in, year out for the last 5 years. And I wouldn't say it was easy, and it still is an ongoing effort. But we've reached a point now where it's proven. It's in the hands of 9 of the Fortune 10. We're now in 9 countries. We are supporting government agencies around the world. There's a lot of work to do to enhance the capability, but the foundational concept is proven out at this stage. Mm-hmm. And where it goes from here, I think, is really exciting, because it can begin to move outside of the risk domain, right? So we talk a lot about China, Russia, Iran. We can now move out of looking at it through that lens and think through, well, how do you leverage the same data asset, and instead of looking for risk, look for opportunity. Look for, a student who has published a really profound paper, and you now want to go recruit them for your quantum team or your AI team. I mean, the level of sophistication and intelligence that companies are having is getting to a nation state level.
The other part of it too that I think is really exciting is the business model. For you folks who like to study that, which I do, data is a very interesting spot to be in right now, because it's a lot like cash. Before Strider, I was on the investment side, and cash is fungible. You can use it for a lot of things. Same with data. You can use it for a whole host of use cases. Again, for government, for also industry. You can use it to do risk-based analysis. You can use it to look at opportunities and compete. The other part of it is that when you're thinking about your future and kind of where you want to work and what you want to work on, data, having a very unique and curated data asset is going to be the next big theme. This past year, it's been all about AI. But really underpinning AI is data. And I think folks are starting to wake up to the fact that the LLMs and a lot of the AI models are going to become commoditized. Many already have. And so the unique differentiator is going to be the underlying data sets that are training and driving the models. And it's no different really when you think about humans, right? We all have a brain. What you feed into it is what you're going to get out of it. And if you feed it the best, you're going to get the best out, hopefully. And that's the same concept that we have here. Also very scalable, rapid deployment. We've designed this in a way where we call it zero-touch architecture. We do not require our clients to give us any data. We don't require them to integrate. We can create all of this in our own box and then deliver it. So that's another unique differentiation in the market as you think about business models and how you can compete. A lot of it's about how fast you can get to market and how fast you can scale. And data is a great model for that. So we wanted to give you just a quick look under the hood, kind of what does the structure of, once you're doing all this collection, you have all this data, you have these concepts around the use cases for protecting IP, protecting supply chains. How do you process it all? So we have 2 patents on how we process data at scale. And as Greg was mentioning earlier, a ton of the data we collect is not in English. We have tons of English, of course, it's global. but how do you get all of that data processed in rapid time? This is essentially how we've done it, where we're blending together kind of foundational processing capabilities. So a multilingual natural language processing. We're using LLMs, of course, for consumption. But as you also think about it, like bread and butter, how do you parse the data? How do you make sense of it? How do you then contextualize it so that when it's delivered to you, it's understandable and it's actionable? That's the whole system that we've built. So everything from the collection to the processing, contextualization, and then delivery. And this is just some examples of like what are the data types that feed into it and what are the type of outputs you can get as you run it through. Great. Anything you want to hit on that?
Yeah, and then look, it's just going to continue to compound. So, I mean, you guys saw the graph of where data is going in terms of like acceleration. This is a compounding asset as we view it, and right now we're adding 20 million net new objects every single day into our system. That is then auto processed, broken down into its component parts, and then associated with a person, organization that we can then feed into our customers. So. This is basically now at a point where the last 5 years we've spent a lot of time doing R&D, perfecting this collection platform, and then pointing it anywhere in the world that we want to go collect. So as of today, it's about 53,000 sources globally. That's everything from the Russian government website to an unindexed database that you could not find on Google that one of our WizKid Intel analysts found, and then like the system is now hitting it and pulling it in. So it is a pretty broad mix. For us, it's always been focused on, as Eric mentioned, the use case. What do you want to get out of it first? Start with the end in mind, and then go position yourself, collect against it. And it's not rocket science, but oddly enough, what I've come to learn is generally speaking, like folks don't think of it that way. They think like, oh, build it and then figure it out. What we would try to do is say, what do you want the outcome to be first, and then can you prove it through some of these experimentations and showcase that you can derive that output by taking these steps. Now 5 years into this, it's a ever living, breathing machine that is doing this without harming any humans in the process. Right. By the way, too, I share this with all of you. And I make jokes about like no human harmed in the process. I did this manually for a decade. Okay, and Eric can tell you I had boils on my face.
Yeah, boils on his face.
Yeah,
bags under his eyes.
Yeah.
And I did see a tear go down his face when there was one analysis that we were doing. It took us about I think it was 8 minutes of processing time to get the same output that it took him 10 months before to do. And we had it all in one pane of glass, a couple clicks, gave you all of the insights. I think after 10 months you delivered.
It was a 120-page report.
120-page report that it was already outdated. It's time. Things are moving rapidly. You can't wait 10 months and read a 100-page report.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I think about time lost, and then now time gained, and what comes from that. But this is actually part of the whole process. If anybody in here is thinking about starting a business, I would encourage you to go and get what I call like the training ground, meaning like go into a battle, go figure out something that is like very challenging, because it's in the challenge, it's in that struggle where you'll have your aha moments. It's not when you're sitting on your couch like coming up with a great idea. It's actually like going through the effort. And for me, it took a long time. I guess I'm a little slow. It took me 10 years to finally like have some neurons connect and go, oh my gosh, like you could actually automate this. That was my journey to go on. But that I think is where, again, I know the theme of this is leadership. Part of that leadership outcome is in the trials of doing, right? And then being able to see that like what you can create, what you can do, is actually showing the path. And that to me is really what leadership is about. Not trying to like mentor folks or things, those are all good things, but leadership is actually about trailblazing. It is about going where people are currently not and trying to show them a path forward that people couldn't imagine. And I will tell you, when we started Strider, it was mostly naysaying. Mostly naysaying. So a lot of nights laying in bed wondering, should I have just like blown up my life, quit my job? I had a 4-month-old at home. He was living his dream life in Oman on a beach. And then came and lived on my couch. And one day I asked him, I said, dude, do you like this? Like, we're doing a startup, you like it? Do you like your life? And he said, what life? I'm on your couch and my family is across the world. So, you know, that to me, I think is a lot of the effort. We're now talking about the outcome of it.
As you can see, he still has a lot of trauma.
I do have trauma about it, yeah. So. Yeah, my whole life is trauma.
Get it out.
Yeah, it's all trauma, yeah. So anyway, we go to the next slide. I went down a rabbit hole there, but there you go. So
I would reiterate though, like one of the reason we kind of architected the presentation this way is because I like what Greg mentioned here with the concept of leadership as you think about it. So many people think of it as speeches or laying out, you know, a grand vision, but actually you have to execute on it. And I think the best leaders are the ones who can communicate problems and then solutions to how to fix them. But most importantly, either inspire people to go solve it or be part of solving it. And this is just one small example for us that we're really passionate about, that we identified a problem, and when you know when you're on the right track, when you feel compelled to do it. You feel compelled to go solve it or figure it out without really knowing the path to do it. And I think that's been the exciting part of the last 5 years. And what gets us so thrilled for what's ahead is really where we're at right now. We think it's just Act 1. It's just the base foundation that as all of this starts to come together, as you scale, you start to see emergent properties that you didn't see before, where now the 1 + 1 = 5. You're in that type of scenario. And that's what we're starting to see right now. And the timing couldn't be better, right, with what's going on around the world. And being able to do that here in Utah, by the way. When we graduated from Utah State, I hope you guys don't mind me saying this, it was almost like if you stayed here in Utah, it was like, oh, shoot, you know, like you didn't make it out. Here, now today, why would you want to leave?
we moved back here.
We moved back here to do this. Why would you want to leave? The state is so dynamic. There's so much great opportunity here. And also it's where people want to come to solve problems.
So look, I'll make one last comment and then we can open up for Q&A. Does that sound good, Dave? Okay. So the last thing I'll say too is I spent my entire career in private sector, but did the bulk of it supporting the US government. And what I wanted to articulate is really this idea that America, our government, needs entrepreneurs to go tackle problems like this. I think, like many of you, have a sense of duty and service. There's a patriotism, I think, that exists in the state that is unique. And oftentimes we will delineate between public sector, private sector, and think, too, that like the government has it covered. And I don't think that's a healthy assumption to have, especially in the environment that we're heading into today. And so oftentimes, you know, when you look at startups, you think of Silicon Valley, you think of like Uber, you know, high growth platform plays. There's a whole other side of this, which is, and I use the term wicked problems. I mean, that's an intelligence community, like, you know, term. They're hard to figure out. That, I think, deserves the entrepreneurial spirit and the attack that an entrepreneur has to it. Government is not going to solve these problems. I'll just tell you straight up. They're not going to figure it out. They are bureaucratically incapable of doing so. The other part of it is the legal systems and structures we have in place don't allow them to. So that provides a profound opportunity, but also some meaning, right, into like what you want to create, what you want to do. And so I share that with you just to kind of maybe open your mind a little bit more into thinking through, if you do want to start a business, if you want to get into entrepreneurship, there's a lot of different things that you can do. Some are going to be more fun, some are going to be more challenging than others, right? But there's a big ocean of opportunity, and the need, particularly when you're talking about national security problems, is definitely there. So thank you guys again for this opportunity. We'll open up to some questions and see where it goes from there. Cool.
You mentioned that data is kind of this new part of economics. Is it replacing something, or is it another thing? So land, labor, capital.
Yeah, so we see it as an addition, not a replacement. So really it's more around what is a critical input required for emerging technology? It's data. It's also not just in emerging tech, it's in the last decade, the theme for a lot of corporations has been digital transformation. It's this really ambiguous concept, but at the end of the day, what it really means is they're trying to get all their internal data together and figure out how to use it. That's really like the crux of it. And then the systems that drive it are what's getting developed and deployed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was interested, is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. I was interested about the IP theft and what, I understand that you have your data models and then companies and agencies and government agencies can take it and they can see the risks that are possibly coming. Do you provide help like security, or do you just provide the data so then they can figure out how to protect themselves?
Yeah, so as of today, we provide the intelligence. Every company has a different policy, program for how they respond to these types of things, particularly when it is related to personnel. So if it's third-party vendors and suppliers, that might be a little bit different. But as you're talking about like personnel, they all have their own different programs and plans, and that's also true then as you go across the world. So we've adopted a model where we will deliver, and then if they want more help, they can ask. But basically, we don't necessarily say, here's what you should do with it, because risk is relative, right? We flag risk based off of a preset methodology. We can tune it and refine it based off our customers' desires. But in essence, they have to then do their own analysis and assessment to see, okay, for all I know, like Strider's flagging somebody that is not in a critical program in the company, but does emanate quite a bit of risk. So that might require a different response than if they were working on their next-gen R&D team.
Super fascinating, guys. I'm a professor of data analytics and information systems, so this is like a symphony music hearing all this. So, but I'm curious. There seems to be a couple of advantages you guys have. One, your access to this very unique data set. And then two, of course, the algorithms and things you developed on top of that. So how would you describe the balance of your competitive niche in those two areas? I mean, is it mostly the data access that you have? And if so, how do you prevent bad actors from seeding bad data? You mentioned this obscure data set that your data whiz found.
Yeah.
How do you know that data is reliable?
Yeah. That's a great question. Data poisoning is always a topic of concern, and when we started the company, we kind of had some.
So do you mind if I just? So basically, what he's asking is like, what if somebody put out there like a bad data set that then like scrambled all of the other good data that we have and begins to undermine the position that we have in the market?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We started believing a couple things. One of them was that we would deal with this. Most startups either get, if you're doing things really well, you're likely to get hacked, you're likely to get sued, you're likely to face some of these challenges. This is one of them. I mean, at the end of the day, the only way you can really identify that and avoid it is you have to have multiple sources of verification. So that's the model that we take. We don't really do much if it's only from one small source, right? And interestingly enough, what we get asked a lot about the data is, are you nervous about any single source, right? Because could it get removed or you lose access to it? And what we've actually found, we have mapped out a lot of the global internet. And as you would imagine, because humans are like this, we love to recreate. And what you find is actually a lot of the data has duplicates all over the world, all over. So that's just the way that humans are, and the internet's really a reflection of humans. And so that's kind of the approach we've taken, having multiple sources of verification and being able to prove out that those have been consistent over time.
Look, you asked too about like data collection versus processing. The unique sauce at Strider is the processing, right? It's the ability to then extract in unstructured formats in multiple languages, like a person's name. So we call it identity disambiguation. In Chinese, you have 1.4 billion people. 84% of the population share 100 last names, and their names are 2, 3, sometimes 4 character combinations. So this is why I joke that I did this manually for a decade. Is this Chun Hao the same Chun Hao across these 10 documents? And then if they go to the UK or the US or Canada, like maybe Chun Hao just became Jimmy Chun. This is actually like a massive issue. And so we've actually developed some technology that can automate the identification and disambiguation of the person, not just the name. And so that's a very unique, I think, capability that even within like foreign governments that we've engaged do not have. So to me, I think that's a bit of the, back to wicked problems, that's a wicked problem. How do you solve for it? It's been a creative act at Strider to figure this stuff out and really try to, I shouldn't say replace, enhance the analyst, right? So that, the amount of time I spent learning Mandarin going to school, I shouldn't be trying to figure out which Chun Hao is which Chun Hao. There's a machine that should do that, right? And so that's kind of how we view a lot of the R&D that we're doing is around automating that analytical process from identification of source to collection to then extraction of information intelligence that can drive an output. Does that answer your question? Great, thanks.
Our CTO is named Mike Brown. That's another big problem. There's a lot of those names going around, for sure.
Hi, my name is Kennedy Waldron. I am a major of marketing. My question for you was, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur who wants to start a business that may be trying to deal with a challenge that seems impossible?
Let's right up our alley. You just have to like pain. In all honesty, it's about how much can you take, especially for what you laid out. If it's a real problem that you know is going to be extremely difficult to crack, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You're going to have to go test them out. What happens with most people is once you hit that first barrier, it makes you reflect. And Greg talked about it. I mean, we experienced it. You're lying in bed at night. You have all these responsibilities, all these things you're supposed to, and you hit that first wall, and you think,
You think, damn it, I made a terrible mistake.
But what you have to train your mind to think instead of that is how do I go around it? How do I break through it? Do I need another person that has deeper expertise on something than I do? Sometimes you need to just go on a walk and work through it. And that's the advice I would give. It's probably not the most useful, but that's the truth.
So I'll give you some pragmatic advice. Raise money from other people. That helps too. Look, when we started Strider, look, we have the benefit of hindsight now. I can look back and go, okay, we are at a very enviable position as a startup today. That was not the case 5 years ago. So what was the process to get here? Belief. So we surrounded ourselves with people who believed that this was possible. And not an echo chamber, by the way, and everybody just patting each other on the back, but believe that, hey, this is worthy of our time. This is worthy of, as Eric said, the pain. And we're going to put skin in the game. Time, money, sacrifice. Everybody who joined the company in the first 2 years gave up something to join. And I would really like to make that a requirement today still, but I'm told that we wouldn't be able to hire enough people. But we either gave up a better job, more money. I mean, our CTO who joined gave up 6 figures in his income. Our head of sales gave up a multi-million-dollar offer to stay at his current company when we told him he was leaving. that is what, when you sacrifice something, you stick with it when you hit the block. And so that, I think, is in the early days, you have to put yourself on as, on like death ground, basically. It's like do or die. And you will eventually like get out of it, but that has to be kind of the mental space that you're in. Again, this is like our experience, as you guys can all pick up on. Like, this was not your typical Silicon Valley startup journey. It was a very different one. And
the way we got traction, we actually had a term, we called it face to pavement. That's how you got traction.
Yeah.
So it was just about going out and putting your neck out there and seeing what blows you got.
Yeah. But look, we also had our seed investor was a guy named Mike Janke, former Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6, choose DIPS Copenhagen. And I remember when we started, he said, I won't try to imitate him, but he said something like, guys, startups is a physical endeavor. And the first time we heard that, we were like, what the hell is he talking about? Like, we're like a data company. But that is something we learned. Like, there's a physicality to it, hopping on a plane, going to meet with people. Like, there's this whole kind of life force to it out of the gate. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer to your question. As you can see, if you wanted to have a sidebar, we could definitely do that. But in essence, I think, as Eric mentioned, it's first saying, I'm going to do it, putting yourself on death ground, and then looking at ways to get around the obstacles and through them, and not just within yourself, but building out that team and getting the support. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kaiden Lee. Actually, I met with you years before and asked the same question I'm going to ask now, but I'm studying accounting and data analytics, and both of you, prior to starting Strider, you've had multiple different positions. I'm curious, I know we could have a sidebar on the question you just answered, but to dig in from a different facet, like, how do you guys evaluate your different opportunities when they do come up? How do you recognize when something's worth and has the value to make the sacrifice and pursue, or when to pivot?
Go ahead. Look, I've actually been thinking about this recently, believe it or not. And I've come to realize, like, so for me, it's all about adventure. It's kind of what I've come to realize. It's actually not about money, as much as I love it. It's really about that sense of, like, adventure. And throughout my career, I realized that's what I was kind of searching for. But also, like, to be able to be your own adventurer and not, being taken around in any kind of company. So, when I think back on my career and the things I said yes to, it was usually not because of, like, the offer was the best. It was because it was something that was exciting. It was something that was new. I could test and challenge myself and see what came of it. I tried not to take the career so seriously, right? And think that, like, every step I take is going to lead to this or that, and, like, over game it. I was just up for an adventure.
Oh, I was gaming it the whole time.
He was gaming it. Yeah, he was gaming it. That's why I went to DC.
That's why we're a good
He went to Wall Street.
Yeah, no, that's a great response. You were talking more about personal, right, or the business?
Your rationality for your thought process?
Yeah. I also think of it of, like, what phase of life are you in? Can you take a lot of risk? That should play a role in it. And for us, when we thought about starting Strider, it was not a single decision for me. It was a family decision. And we also realized, like, probably we were in a spot in our life where we could take that risk, knowing that, like, later on may be more difficult, though it's possible. And that played into it as well. So I think, you want to line up interest, which can lead to passion. And I say that intentionally because sometimes your passion, you won't know it's a passion until you're doing it, you're engaged in it. And then over time it can manifest as that. And when you find it, it's a sweet spot. You just got to keep driving towards that. And I think that's what was happening with us. We had very different careers. We were in very different parts of the world doing totally different things. Yet we were both seeing the same thing and then talking about it all the time. And we realized that was the shared passion, and we jumped in and tried to figure it out.
So our father, who's here, he started his first company at 51. And when I asked him, I said, well, what advice do you have? He said, start it younger. So there you go. Yeah.
So you guys sound like you have like access to tons of data, and I'm kind of wondering, like, do you guys store the data that you're able to access, or is it more of like an accessibility thing? And then how do you protect your data from, like you said, like theft is a huge thing. Anyway, so that's my question. I'm curious about how you handle that liability.
So some of it we do store and keep. We always want to have historical context, right? So we want to be able to look at things through the lens of a trend, for example. So you have to have all of that. Some of the data, though, that we have is more as a pull, right, as needed. Security, of course, is like, I live with the assumption that nothing is secure. No device you have, no software program. I think that's proven to be pretty true. If you look at a lot of the incidents that have occurred, even in the most like hardened systems. So nothing will be perfect. You just have to do your best, and you want to also be resilient. So if you do, like I mentioned before, we had the assumption that you'd have some sort of cyber incident. The concept really that we think of it is what's the speed to get back up and going. That's kind of how we've designed our model and our systems. You can't prevent everything 100%. Do your best, but then be able to get spun back up really quickly.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing Strider in the next 5 years?
You have probably a different perspective. My perspective is talent. As you scale, you start to need very specific types of expertise, and I think that's going to be an issue. I think that's the issue actually for like every tech company, by the way. In the United States, we do have a shortage of really skilled folks in data science. AI, if you're an AI ML engineer right now, you're just like living your best life. We're seeing people graduate and getting $300,000 to $500,000 offers, and they've never really even coded much except for undergrad. So I think that will be something that we'll have to confront and deal with.
Yeah. Look, I would agree. Like, to me, a lot of it comes back to culture. People make the culture. As you're scaling the business, you can start to, people, in the early days, we had very good control. So when you think about decision making, the decisions were tight, they were focused, and they were aligned. As you scale and you have more people, now the decision making becomes diffuse. Some people might do dumb things. They might say things that aren't actually true or reflective of the business. So you actually have to now train, get folks who maybe didn't have those early days of sacrifice and buy-in to then get caught up on okay, how do we do things here that are a little bit different? And that's what we're trying to protect, actually, as we scale the business, is protect that culture and that sense of mission that has gotten us to where we are today.
Yeah. Dean Anderson probably knows this. You can set a policy, right, but you can't always control the implementation. So sometimes it unravels. Thank you.
I know there's more questions. Unfortunately, we need to cut it off a little bit earlier than we normally would because we have a special presentation. And we are going to bestow on Greg and Eric our Professional Achievement Award from the Huntsman School of Business. So, Dean Anderson, would you like to come and make a...
Yeah, I would, but let's thank Greg and Eric. That was so great. That was fantastic, you guys. Amazing. So, we're going to give you a little bit. Great. So, we do this once or twice a year, and today we got a 2-for-1. So we're really happy about that. So as you know, our motto is "Dare Mighty Things," taken from the great comment from President Theodore Roosevelt, and you guys are really exemplifying that for all of us, of daring mighty things. I mean, talk about a wicked problem. Talk about a great opportunity. And your life story is really the story that John Huntsman had in mind when he endowed this school. He hoped for students to graduate who could become leaders like you guys. I wish he were here today. I wish he were here bestowing this award on you, because he would do it with his full heart and soul and with great gratitude for all that you are doing. So with tremendous appreciation and respect, we bestow upon you, Greg, and upon you, Eric, the Professional Achievement Award of the Huntsman School of Business. Congratulations.